I think for me to get away from just the hubbub of everyday life, it's not so much a place I need to go to, it's a space, if I can draw that distinction. So the geography can change. There are spaces around the world where a certain community of my colleagues regularly meet up for conferences, for research, for public talks and presentations. And it doesn't matter that I've never been to the city before. I know that I'll never be short of company. We'll be able to talk about very arcane and obscure topics, and I know there'll be a good group of people who are interested in the same thing. And part of the travel experience too, it's a very old metaphor of the journey of life though, but I think it's still valid, that idea that you get on a plane and you actually traverse the world and you get a sense of its full reach, its full breadth. There's something really quite relaxing about feeling very small and insignificant in that broader scheme of things.
Welcome to A Third Place, a podcast about the importance of public spaces in the personal and professional development of prominent Australians. This series celebrates the 60th anniversary of the University of Melbourne's Baillieu Library as a special third place between home and work. I'm your host, Peter McPhee. In today's episode, I spoke with Shakespeare scholar David McInnis about places for learning about and connecting with the past. David is a senior lecturer in Shakespeare Studies here at the University of Melbourne. He's authored numerous books, including Mind Travelling and Voyage Drama in Early Modern England, and has been featured in publications including the New York Times, and is the founder of the Lost Plays database. I began by asking David about his recollections of what the library meant to him as an undergraduate.
The Baillieu has always just been the centre of campus for me, I think. It's that sort of calm in the middle of a very busy, frantic environment. It's the place you could always seek some sort of refuge and find that tranquility. And I think that sense of space in the library has always been something I've appreciated. It's a large building, there's large floor plans, large open spaces where you find other students all coming together. But that wall of glass, the windows that look out over South Lawn, it's the thing, right? It makes the space feel at least double its size. You feel that sense of real depth and the connection to the campus by being on whatever floor you're on. And so I have these distinct memories of always being in the Baillieu and sort of feeling, even if it's a rainy day, that you're still part of that rich campus experience, but from a vantage point of relative peace and quiet.
Was that your favourite spot, next to the window? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. I think probably the most abiding memory I have of being in the Baillieu was I did my undergraduate at Melbourne, but I did my master's in Toronto. And I left in the middle of winter when, it's minus 30 degrees, there's snow and ice everywhere. I came back home and had to finish off my essays. And I did that from, I think, the third floor of the Baillieu. And so here I am looking out through that window, the glorious summer sunshine, the complete contrast with the Canadian brutal winter. And there's rainbow lorikeets flying, and the gum trees are in flower. And it's just quintessential Australiana from that vantage point on the library desk after the contrast with the cold, frigid north. It was just amazing.
Oh, yes, I think that experience of sitting near the windows, which is what I did, although mostly on the ground floor, I think, is a very precious one, being able to look out over the South Lawn and some of those superb eucalypts and other trees that are just outside is very special. What sort of a student were you, by the way? Were you a nerd or...?
I was one of those foolish people who did a double degree. I did arts and commerce, though I don't typically confess to it, except I guess I've given it away now. And my transcript was pretty much half-half. Got a first class for arts and a bare minimum passes for commerce. Hence, I'm here today teaching Shakespeare, not econometrics.
But you completed your degree, your double degree.
Oh, I'm stubborn, yes. I wanted that piece of paper.
So... in that undergraduate degree of yours, what was the critical moment? Was it then that you discovered Shakespeare, or had that already happened at school?
It's hard to pinpoint when you first have that exposure to Shakespeare, but I do remember a pivotal moment as, I think, a first-year student wandering those labyrinthine back corridors of the Baillieu where I probably shouldn't have been, trying to get out of a bathroom and up a stairwell and back to civilization, and stumbled by accident upon the rare books room. Which it's an off-limits area, but the librarian at the time, I think it was Merita Smith, very kindly took me and my friend in and showed us around, including showing us the Shakespeare Second Folio that the library has. And that was just absolutely extraordinary. We had no intentions of being there that day. It was completely random stumbling upon her and then the room and then just being offered this treasure to look at. And I remember thinking at the time, I think it's Oxford where the new students have this hypothetical question of trying to calculate how many atoms from Caesar's last breath are around us now, how they're dispersed around the world. And I'm thinking, here I am in close proximity to Shakespeare's Second Folio, and the things this book has seen since 1632, and how it's arrived in the Antipodes, and it's sequestered away in this small rare books room at the University of Melbourne's library. It was a phenomenal experience.
Back in 2016, you wrote an article about why Shakespeare still matters.
Yes.
What was your point?
Well, I mean, here we were 400 years after Shakespeare died, 2016, and everyone around the world was having these immense celebrations and festivals and exhibitions, and it's quite an extraordinary phenomenon. It was a privilege to be part of, but the very question of the outlight was, why do we even care? I mean, here we are on the other side of the world that Shakespeare could never have imagined. I think the closest he or his contemporaries ever got to setting a play in Australia was a play called The Island Princess by his friend John Fletcher, set in Indonesia. But he had no idea about Australia. So why should we even care, really? And so I started reflecting on that, and I was just thinking about how Shakespeare is materially present in our culture. There are birds in parts of America that were introduced because Shakespeare fans wanted to release every kind of bird mentioned in the complete works. There are streets in Melbourne that are named after Shakespeare and his characters. There's that material presence of Shakespeare everywhere. Shakespeare helps us think through very complex problems and questions that still face society today. So there's a number of reasons, really, but I don't see Shakespeare going away anytime soon.
I'm wondering how across the years now your own relationship with libraries has changed given the nature of the work you now do.
Our library is still my happy place. I freely admit that when we travel, we tend to end up in libraries more often than not. You travel for work, it's research. You're in there from as soon as the library opens at 8:45 or 9 in the morning until it closes. And there's this thing called a library coma, which some people may have heard of, which is you're completely oblivious to the outside world. You don't get up and stretch. You don't need sustenance. You don't need drink. You sit there. You are just buried in these amazing books in this extraordinary contexts. And before you know it, the day is over, and you sort of emerge, and you're quite stiff and sore and cold, and you need to warm up again as you sort of come into daylight and re-emerge into the real world.
What about your students? I mean, do they use the library and experience the library in the way that you're just describing, or do they, I mean, you're well known for your innovation in terms of the new technologies and the way you teach your students. What's their relationship like with the library in your teaching?
Well, I think it's only gotten better, really. I mean, for all my fond recollections of what the Baillieu was like 20 or so years ago, I walk through there now, and the student spaces are phenomenal. It's a very enticing, welcoming space that you actually want to be in. I've just always found it so impressive. The library has really taken the lead on that, looking after the students and making them feel part of this campus and having that experience. So I try and get the students into the rare books room as often as I can. I have a lot of object-based learning. We bring out as many 17th century books as possible, and sometimes their afterlives as well, more recent critical editions of Shakespeare, just to look at how the typography and the design and layout has changed over centuries, how these playbooks demand to be read, how the format has affected our reading experience. And I love that light bulb moment where the students are confronted with, I don't know, maybe Ben Jonson's complete works from 1616, the year Shakespeare died, and they're just looking at this document, and you can see that full weight of the realization hitting them, and this sort of smile and sort of the shock of awe. It's a wonderful, transformative experience.
David, in a recent piece you wrote, you agreed with Sir Jonathan Bates when he said, "There's a risk of the long view of the past becoming flattened by the simultaneity of data derived from the digital world." What was Bates getting at there?
It's Sir Jonathan Bates' book about the classics and how once upon a time, we have the classical education and we have a good knowledge of literary history, and it was fairly straightforward, complex material, but knowable, definable. There was edges to the canon, and there was something that could be mastered. We are now producing new information, new data at an unprecedented rate, an exponential rate. The self-publishing platforms, the digital platforms permit this and facilitate this, and that's wonderful. And things that are possible now through the digital are just mind-blowing. But at the same time, there is a risk that we are spreading very thin, that we are focused on the present exclusively, and don't have a way to get a firm grip on everything, I suppose. And so a new kind of digital literacy is required to be able to sift through what's really important and useful, distant readings to get a sense of broader trends rather than sort of micro-analysis necessarily. And I think Bates' argument is really that there's a risk that we're going to lose the ability to comprehend the classics in the past because we no longer have that form of, a long-form history or long-form argument. We're so immersed in the present and short snippets of exchange that we're starting to think differently as a result of the change in media.
So the classics just become one other information source.
Yeah, not privileged amongst the above the others, and possibly with increased entry barriers to comprehension and to sharing.
Well, I think that highlights the significance of what you're doing with your students when you actually get them into the rare books room and have them see and touch and think about the actual physical production and physical presence of something that's hundreds of years old, and to get them to think about the layers of historical production that have occurred since then, and to give them that, in a sense, depth of knowledge and sensibility.
It's absolutely vital to have both ends of the spectrum. They need to have an awareness of how social media works, how you can write something very stupid in 3 sentences and send it out into the world, and then there'll be a public outcry about what you've said in a very spur-of-the-moment thing, compared to when you had to manually compile a book that took several individuals many months to actually put into print, and that you're not going to have that accidental release of information on the spur of the moment then. So it's good for students to see both sides of that, and to be thinking both in terms of the long-form argument and also concision. Being able to say something very erudite, very quickly, very simply is also a powerful skill. But ideally, students should have both.
You have a young family.
I do.
I'm wondering whether for your children, libraries or books have a special place in their lives?
Absolutely. They've both loved reading since an early age. I mean, they can't actually read themselves. One of them is starting to learn to read herself, but the other, only 2 years old, is not there yet. But storytelling is still something that's very important. Having those nightly stories and the imagination and the imaginative play that comes through that world of fiction is still very crucial.
Are there other places that matter to you, other third places, or is it libraries?
I think actually I love gardening. It's very meditative. It's relaxing. You can switch off and just be in the moment and feel that connection with something. And I think just walking through gardens as well, especially gardens that have historical values. There's the Chelsea Physic Garden in London, where apothecaries in training have been working for 400 years, and they collect samples of plants from all around the world. And there's something about that knowledge that's produced through that manual labour and the study of the natural world that's really quite fascinating for me.
I was intrigued when you said earlier that there were people who made a point of releasing into the wild all of the birds that were mentioned in Shakespeare. What was that about?
Late 19th century, a Shakespeare Appreciation Society in New York City released starlings, amongst other things. But starlings are the worst in terms of they're now an absolute pest in the US, and they weren't native there. That was simply there because I think Hotspur in 1 Henry IV refers to the starlings at one point. And so therefore this society collected every kind of bird mentioned by Shakespeare and decided to populate North America with these birds. Quite extraordinary. But I guess it's no different to the English coming to Australia and releasing rabbits and foxes and trying to recreate Englishness for the local habitation.
David, you've spoken with us about the importance of third places in your life in terms of places to study and learn, such as the library, the importance of being in the natural world, your love of gardening. I'm wondering whether there are also special third places in the domain of the arts.
Theatre's the other place that are very important to me in terms of what I've been loving and what I find relaxing too. And I guess some of the most exciting ones are the ones that just spontaneously appear, like the Pop-Up Globe that was in Melbourne a couple of years ago. And I've seen a company who tours around the world. I saw them in Oslo, who only perform in old castles. That's their remit. And so I love that engagement of people with particular places to create that third place of a fictional space, to transform the everyday and the mundane into something extraordinary that's beyond the realm of regular perception. I also like the idea of lost theatres. I like walking around Melbourne and thinking about where these 19th century theatres once would have been and once would have attracted people with a common interest. There's also a number of pubs around Melbourne with Shakespearean themes, or had been. And there's one up on Russell Street that used to be the Shakespeare Hotel there. It used to have a Juliet Terrace on one side and a Romeo Lane on the other side. And all these things are just part of the original charting of the city of Melbourne, and they sort of faded into obscurity as the decades have gone on. But they were once absolutely essential to how Melbourne as a city conceived of itself.
David, you've become a very busy person, both inside the university and outside. And I'm wondering whether there are now special places that you go for rest and rejuvenation.
I think for me to get away from just the hubbub of everyday life, it's not so much a place I need to go to, it's a space, if I can draw that distinction. So the geography can change, but there are spaces around the world where a certain community of my colleagues regularly meet up for conferences, for research, for public talks and presentations, and In particular, the Shakespeare Association of America has an annual conference around Easter, but in a different city every single year. And it doesn't matter that I've never been to the city before. I know 1,000 Shakespeareans who are going to appear there, and I'll never be short of company. We'll be able to talk about very arcane and obscure topics, and I know there'll be a good group of people who are interested in the same thing. And part of the travel experience too, it's a very old metaphor of the journey of life though, but I think it's still valid, that idea that you get on a plane and you actually traverse the world and you get a sense of its full reach, its full breadth. There's something really quite relaxing about feeling very small and insignificant in that broader scheme of things.
Thanks for listening to A Third Place. I'm your host, Peter McPhee. Today's episode is brought to you by the Baillieu Library and Learning Environments at the University of Melbourne. It was produced by Chris Parlow and Phil Shaw. Recorded by Gavin Neighbour at the Horwood Recording Studio. Edited by Phil Shaw, David Withers and Catherine Hayhoe. Rory Mullen is our intern, and our associate producers are Andrea Hurt and Ashley Sutherland for the Baillieu Library, and Eileen Wall for Learning Environments.